Welcome on behalf of Edureka. I've been in the IT industry close to 20 years, and I'm an alumnus of Mumbai University. So as you know, the topic today is Python logging system, and I'll cover the different facets or aspects of Python logging system. So here's an agenda, quick agenda. What is Python? I'm sure a lot of you out there would know what is Python. The Python features, logging system, and prerequisites, objectives. So you will see a demo of it as well. All right. So here's a plan out of this session. First, I'll go through some theory in this deck. After this, I'll show a quick demo of how the login screen will look before I actually delve into the code part, right? So what is Python? It's a scripting programming language, and I'm sure everybody would know it's one of the most popular programming languages, scripting languages out there. Just a small fact, it is. I know some of these things are not very important from the technical, but it's a good icebreaker, a good thing to warm up by having this kind of slides. I am not sure whether you know the origin of this name Python. So it was based on some comedy troupe called Monty Python. It's not the Python the snake that you see on most of the cover pages of, in fact, all the books, right? So it's not the snake. It's actually based on a comedy group. So it's a light fact. One of the best things about Python is it's the syntax and everything is easy. I'm sure most of you would have seen a Python code. So see, any programming language, reading and writing takes different effort, right? Reading is always easier, even if you learn a new language, whether programming or our own language. Reading is always easier. The writing is always complex. The one best thing about Python is, even if you don't know Python much, if you read a Python, you will understand a lot of things. It's very intuitive, and that is what it means. Easy syntax. To write, yeah, you need some practice, but to read, it's quite simple. So features of Python. So simplicity, like I said, it's very simple to understand. So there are a lot of libraries, a lot of features on top of it, but the core, it's very easy to understand, very intuitive. And once you have some practice, you'll find you'll prefer it compared to a lot of traditional languages, programming languages out there for writing code. It's an open source, so yeah, you can install. It's out there for everyone, and you can use it for commercially as well. And there are package managers, libraries such as Anaconda. I'll come to that. Portability, yeah, you can run it anywhere. You have a Python virtual environment or a Python interpreter, you install it somewhere, you can port your program. Even between the Windows machine and Linux machine, it's very easy to port without much hassle. So one of the most important feature of Python is extensibility, right? So what it means is you can see one of the things with scripting languages, since it is interpreted, I mean, especially a language like Python, it's interpreted, there is some delay in executing. So it's not like you are compiling a code. So any compiled code will have a better run for performance. For example, if you write something in C++ and compile it, it will definitely have a much higher performance as compared to just writing Python. So one of the best things about Python is you can extend it by adding C library. So there's something called Cython. So what Cython is you can actually define the variables in Python using some commands like cdef. And then what happens is you can then compile it into a C program. It becomes a C program. But that C program you can directly import into the Python program, just like you would import any other Python program. And these C programs are super fast. So basically, if you write just to try your computer, if you write a for logic iteration 1 million times, you write a Python and you write a Cython and then import that Cython, you'll see drastic improvement in performance when you run and see. So that extensibility is one of the good features of Python. Along with that, there's so many libraries out there for Python which can be imported. So I'll cover that in a moment. So it's an interpreted language, right? So yeah, if you write Cython, you can compile it as a C code, but essentially it's an interpreter. So there's an interpreter which looks at line by line each line of Python and then executes, and that there's an error, it will stop that. So it's an interpreted language, and that makes it very easy to debug Python programs. One of the great advantages. Libraries. So this is, I mean, there are a lot of important features of Python, but I would say this is number one because there's a huge open source community working on Python who supports different kinds of libraries. So anything from socket programming to machine learning, deep learning, even quantum computing. So any new technology comes up, there will always be a Python APIs or support for Python. And while there will be in each space, you will have another language competing with Python, but you'll see Python everywhere. And that is entirely due to the huge open source community who like Python. And any new algorithm out there, for example, machine learning and deep learning, any new algorithm comes out, first you will see a Python library made out of it before you see other technologies. So that's one great, and that's the reason We all want to go into Python or work on Python, most of the technologies, because that will be a library. It's not a silver bullet, right? You can't use it every place, but essentially a lot of the new areas like deep learning, machine learning, or it's cloud computing. If you are working with AWS, they have a Boto library, or if it's quantum computing, Python helps a lot. The last part is you can write it as a procedural language, or you can write it as a object-oriented, so it supports both flavors. All right. Who uses Python? Yeah. So that's a question that just answered a moment ago. Across different application, they'll find you are users of Python, and just in terms of different organizations and companies using that. So now, what is the login system? It takes inputs from users, right? This is the login screen. You enter an email ID, user ID, password, you log in, and then if you don't have an account, you sign up. This is all a login system is, and there are a few aspects of it which I'll explain as we move on to the demo part. So prerequisites for login system, right? So what are the different blocks that comprise a login system? So you have a login form that you just saw a moment ago, then a registration form for signing up. And why I'm rushing through some of the slides is because you all would be familiar with what a login system, what is sign up, because so every application nowadays requires some kind of sign up and login. So the third part is where the database integration for login authentication. Yes, that's where all this information, all these records are stored, and the HTTP methods to access. I'll come to that. This login system project objective. We will be using Flask framework, right? So those of you who are not aware, it's a micro framework to build Python web applications, and it also comes with a lightweight web server, and that you can, Flask is embedded with a lightweight web server, and you can actually host web application on using Flask framework. So one thing about Flask is it's very lightweight, it's very easy to understand, and it's also very extensible, which means the footprint of a Flask framework is very light. What I mean is very small amount of code will be there in a Flask framework, but you can add a lot of other libraries like security or database on top of it and make it complete framework with all the features of a framework. And the competitor to Flask in this space is Django. So Django and Flask, these are the top two web frameworks, web server, and which host lightweight web servers for hosting web applications in Python. Then database integration, there are multiple libraries, multiple connectors. You can use Flask, MySQLDB, you can use anything. And the URL, the web page, right? When I say URL, the web page that you saw on the browser communicates with the web server, the Flask-based web server written in Python using post and get methods. Just hold on to this, and when you see the demo, you see the code, this point will get much more clear, right? So login authentication, what all entails in a login authentication. So you read the input from the login form. Again, database connection. So database connection is basically to authenticate the users, authenticate and authorize, send those values to database, and you will see all this in the demo as well as in the code. So this is sign up. Here's been sign up. Reading again the same flow. There isn't much different, and you all know what a sign up is. But this is the same standard steps, except that you will be inserting into the database. So when you log in, you are reading from the database. When you are signing up, you are actually writing into the database, right? So now let me show you a simple demo screen, right? So here's the thing. Okay, so far I showed you a theoretical presentation, a deck. Now we as human beings, we understand better by visualization than just text, right? So let me just give a glimpse of what we will be building, and then before we jump into the code. So here's the login and sign up screen, right? And I'll just put CR7. Let me enter credentials. So it's saying welcome Cristiano Ronaldo, because that's already there in the database, right? So let me log out. Let me say some other user. I put an invalid password. There's incorrect password for Messi. So here's the thing. See, usually in enterprise applications and all, the whole login screen using different technologies like mostly JavaScript based Angular or React.js, those kind of technologies. But this is how we build a login screen from Python. So this session is about that. And one thing I want to just mention is usually you will not see this kind of error message invalid password for a user ID, because the thing is, due to security, whether the user ID is incorrect or the password is incorrect, you will get a generic message saying, hey, user ID or password is invalid, so that you don't tell the person who's logging in, hey, there is already a user ID for this, because this is useful for people want to do some mischief, if they know there's a user ID existing, they can do it. Also, just for demonstration, I'm showing the incorrect password, but usually you will get a message that whether it's user ID password will say invalid. All right. Example, if I put something, it will say invalid user. Now let me put the correct password for Messi, and it will say welcome Lionel Messi. So this is the profile page. All right. So understand this. What you see here, I just remember it. If you have a notebook, you can note it down. This is the profile screen, right? When I'm saying, hey, welcome. And then I'm showing a logout screen. I click on logout, it comes back to login screen, right? This is another HTML login. Let's say I try to add Tony Kroos. So these are different football players if you don't know them. So invalid user, it's saying, right? So let me register. Let's say Kroos. Let me enter his email ID, and then I'll set up some password. That's it. So sign up successful. You can go back to login screen. Now let me log in Kroos, right? So it's saying welcome Tony Kroos, right? So you have a profile page, you have a login page, and you have a new page, sign up. All right. So this is what you will be going to see in the code. So now what you see here on the left, let me show you here. So you can ignore the first part. So there's a login HTML, right, which is essentially the HTML page. So let me just open it and see how it looks. I know all of you have seen HTML, but just let me open with Chrome. So this is the pure HTML on Chrome. Now you'll see what is this gibberish. Don't worry, I'll come to that. But rest of the objects on the screen, same thing that you have seen here. Okay, so that's all HTML is. And there are three main HTMLs here. Login, like I said, this one, login screen. Then the profile, where it says, hey, welcome, Lionel Messi, and the sign up, right, new registration, where I registered 20 Kroos. Okay, so I don't want you to, I'll walk you through some of this code, but I don't, want to build it as we walk along, because this is something you will get. So this application I have built for this particular session, and you can, making this HTML is not a big deal, but I'll focus on the Python part of it. All right. So I just want to show the Flask. Okay, I'm using the Flask micro framework here. So this is a rough copy. What I'm going to do is let me just show you Flask before we jump into login part of the screen. Okay. So this is all again boilerplate code. What I mean is you have a Flask library. You import the class from it, and then you define the app. So in this case, name is actually will be main. So in any new program when you execute, it will be main, right? So this is a standard code. So here is where you will find how easy it is to run Flask. Okay, so what you see here is something called decorators in Python. Okay, so decorators are kind of wrappers around functions. So you have defined a function here and just feed it to the decorator, right? And the decorator will actually make it an endpoint or the URL. So this is a URL that you see, and you want to map this URL to a specific function on the web server. So this kind of mapping is done by the decorator takes care of linking that URL with the function. So what I mean is if I put a slash, it will say, hey, return hello, right? So I'm just showing this code to, before you see this code and it becomes very complicated, let me show you the smaller code, right? So I'm just saying hello all, right? So here's the thing, let me just run this and probably you will be able to see it, right? So that's it. I just run this program and you see so localhost. So this is binding to some IP address 00, but I'll see something on local port 5001. Okay, so let me see 5001. What do I have? Hello all, right, on the screen. So what has happened is I have said the URL is slash. That's it. It goes to this function, right? The browser sends the action to this particular function, and it returns return hello all. That's it, and that's what you are seeing here. Now that's all. So now let's say I want to build something. So let's say I will just right. So I don't have a welcome page, so not found. This URL is not there, right? So I will just uncomment it. So I have started, I'll change the code, automatically the server has restarted. So you can see below, right? So if you see, let me use pen. So you see, every time I make some change to the code, it restarts here. And then if I go, and then I restart, welcome, right? So it's as simple as that. So that's the beauty of Flask. In 10 lines, you're already fired up a web server, okay? And the last part, so you can have, other something else instead of welcome, and that you can put whatever you want, and that's it. It's all done. And this is just saying from the application a certain, you don't worry about all this are boilerplate code, but just say boilerplate code. But what's saying is bind to this particular IP address, which means you can connect it from localhost or any other. There's a public IP to this server, then you can connect to that. So that's the part of about it, right? So that's about Flask. Now let me show you the different artifacts, right? So let me quickly run through the HTML because this is more of a Python web server or a login system. So I'll focus on the Python side. Let me just quickly show you some of the control fields. So I have a user field HTML. So you don't have no HTML. I'm just highlighting certain parts of it, which, so if you see there is a user, right, which you saw on the screen. This user is that. Then there is a password, right, which is again you see password, and that's it. And when I enter this, so what happens is, so let me switch back to my. So when I hit enter on this particular web page, right, login or something, what happens? There is an action, right? This is inside a form object HTML. It's an action which says /login, right? So when you hit enter on the HTML screen, the action is to call endpoint /login, and that /login I have defined in my main program, right? /login, and it's a big code, so I don't want to confuse you at this point of time. Okay, so let me go step by step. But that's what happens. It comes to the login screen, right? Now, one thing I'll cover each aspects of Flask, right, and how each of this function helps you in defining or firing up the web server or serving the URL. And end of the day, we enter user, we enter password, we click login. It will come to this particular method, and then what happens is what we'll see, right? Now, before that, let me show you this, right? So what I showed you earlier was a rough one, a simple 16-line code, so that you can understand how simple Flask is. Now I'll come to the main code. Initial parts, it's all same, right? Instead of app, I'm saying main, and blueprint is nothing, just like an application. So each application can be one. So if you have multiple applications, there could be multiple blueprints. So you don't have to worry about all that. It's just that simplistically, main is an app. That's why I say main.route. So if I put / on the browser, it should take me to the index. And what is the index doing? There's something called redirect, right? Redirect means you have to, if there is nothing happening on the screen, it should redirect to the main.login, right? So redirect URL for main.login. Main is this name of the program. Okay, so redirect main.login. Main is the name of the application, and login is the name of the function here, right? So what happens if I go back to the browser, and I will not put any logins, anything. I'll just put /, that's it. It still gets automatically redirected to the login, right? In case, let's say I have put something else, right? Return, let's say I heard return render template. I'll tell you what render template is for a signup.html, right? And I'll comment this out. So now what I'm saying, if I hit /, right, it should go and render. So render is a technical term. So it's just like rendering a template or rendering HTML on the browser. So if it's a /, don't redirect to login. Just show me signup.html, right? So let me try that again. See, now it's not taking me to login. Now it is to bring me to a sign up screen. Okay, so it's like one line you can move here and there. So that's some of the things. Flask makes your life so very easy on the respect. Let me restore the world to its normal order, right? So yeah, it goes to login, right? That's it. So now let's move on to the next part of it. All right. So for now, let me just create a copy of it, or let me create in the folder itself. I have a copy. This main, let me just remove it. Everything which is what is there. I'll come to that later. Okay. So now what login happen when I do login? This is what is happening. I'm setting under template login.html, and that's why when I say login, or whether it is whatever it is coming to this particular page, right? Similarly, new, right? new is the name that I give for a sign up. All right. So if that is sign up request, let's say I say new. All right. So what will happen? If it's new, I will render this HTML page on the browser. So I'm basically returning this particular template or HTML to the main screen. Right. So I'll say new comes a register screen. Right. Similarly, that's a third screen that I said. Right. Profile. Now you are saying render template profile.html. So let me say profile and some user. All right. So let me just say profile saying not found. Right. So now let's say I say messy. Right. So see name, full name and all is not that because it's expecting full name. Right. I'll say full name equal to email. And now let me run it. So it takes a while. So sometimes I'm saying welcome Lionel Messi. Right. So basically if I don't have any code, I just say render, I'll see those pages. Okay. But that is, so logout I'll cover later. Okay. Because once we complete everything else, we'll move on to the logout part. Right. So now let's go one by one. Right. So when we are logging in, okay, here I have put something called error, right? So for now you can ignore it. I'll show it towards the end. There's something called template, Jinja templates on HTML screens for dynamic rendering of web pages. So I know what I just said, but it sounds very abstract. Hence, don't worry about error for now. You just see render template. Understand that a render template is to render a specific HTML onto the browser, and redirect is to direct it to some function, right? So I'm redirecting to this function and this will do the rendering. Okay, that's about it. Now, there's one other thing I want to touch upon, right? Called session. Okay, so what happens is when you log in to a screen, so your user, some of your details are actually stored in session variables or cookies. So that's why, any application you go to multiple pages, it recognizes it as you. It doesn't ask you to enter your password at every step, right? So it holds some session information. So that's something, once you log in, it is able to, the application will tell you, hey, you are the so and so person. So it will show all the different pages in the web application. That is why earlier when I typed in Tony Cruz and I logged in, it's saying welcome Tony Cruz, because the session variable is a variable which still stores Tony Cruz, and then until I say logout, it will not clear the session variable. Okay, and now nothing will happen because it's all, I'm still running with the older code. So I just removed a lot of code, but I'm just saying that takes you out. Okay, the whole session information is removed. All right. So let me now talk about one other aspect in this main dot route. So like I said, this is a decorator function, right? This works on this function, so it's a wrapper around the function. So one is the URL, other is the methods. Okay, so I'm not sure, whether how many of you understand the post and the get HTTP methods, but let me talk about that a little bit. So when we send a request from the front end to the server, so either we do a get, that means that I want to see some request from database, so I send a get request, so I get me some details on the screen. The other is the post, where I'm submitting a form, I'm submitting some details, so it's a post, and then it gets updated into the database variable. So that is the post part of it, and that's another aspect that gives. So depending on it's a post or a get, we can do different things. Okay, now let me not write some code around it. So let's say it's a login. Okay, now when we log in, what should happen? So if you go to the login HTML, right, it says login and method post. So I'm submitting the username and the password. All right. So I will go to main and I will just say if request is one of the methods or classes within the Flask library, right? So when you submit certain information from the HTML page, you can find it under request. All right. So this is a object which holds all this, the different information that is sent from the browser. So if you say method is equal to post, because I'm saying it's a post request, right? So I'm saying if request is equal to post, let me take down those requests, right? Let's say user is equal to, user is a local variable. So I'll say request dot form. That's the So I'm submitting a form here. Let me go to the login HTML. So I'm submitting a form, right? Hence, you'll say request.form, and then you will have user, okay? And then I will take the password, right? Same syntax, uh, request.form. So what is, let me look at the password name. So if you see, let me, yeah, user is, name is user, and password is, yeah, PSW, right? You can just about this yellow, PSW. So let me erase, thanks, yeah. So PSW, so this is the password field, all right? And then, see, here's the thing now. Fine, the user has entered the user and password, but how do we know whether the user is existing or not? For that, we need database, right? Otherwise, how will the program know? And that is where I'm just, I introduced you to this particular MySQL RDBMS database. That's what I'm using here. Okay, you can use any kind of database for holding this information, but MySQL is the common. It's also an open source, and it's pretty powerful. So I'm using a MySQL database on AWS Cloud. So this is not hosted locally. I will host it on the AWS Cloud, and I'll show you how the table looks, because now that you have entered the user and the password, someone has to go and verify in the database, right? So how to do that? So that's where we have this. Let me open that specific show open editors. So model.py. All right. So one thing is, just in the interest of the time and the depth of the subject, I'll focus on the Flask web server, but I'll just quickly run you through what this my model program does. Is it has a MySQL API, right? And there are some, I'm giving 4 details, right? If I want to connect to a database, I need 4 details. One is the IP address. So this is the IP address, or in this case, it's called DNS, yeah, domain name system, DNS of the MySQL database on AWS Cloud. The database is dev, user ID is admin, and password, if you see, it's a big gibberish, and I'll tell you why it's a long gibberish in a moment. But let me show you the table. Right, so this is a MySQL workbench. This is also an open source tool you can use to connect to MySQL database on your local or anywhere in the world, as long as you can connect it. It has a public DNS. All right. So this is the name of my table, user, and if you see, I have 4 records already created, right? CR7, 𝐀𝐛𝐨𝐮𝐭 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and Messi, and so this is how I check whether the user is existing in this table or not. So I'll just check. Username is the primary key. I believe you know. I mean, I'm sure all of you know what is a primary key. So there's a primary key, and based on that, I check the record is existing. If it's not existing, I have to insert a row, right? That is how sign up happens. And if you see the password, it's all gibberish. Reason being, I'm actually hashing it. Never a good idea to save passwords, the true password in programs or in database. Hence, I'm using something called hashing. What is hashing? Yeah, that's again a separate topic. But just know for now that whenever you send information in a secure website, right, your passwords either get encrypted or it get hashed, right? So there are 2 ways. So encryption means you encrypt something, you can decrypt using same key somewhere else. In case of hashing, there is no unhashing kind of. If it's hash, you cannot extract the password out from a hash. It's just like every time you enter a password, the program will apply hashing algorithm on that, and then it will go and check the hash value, and then it will say it's matching or not. But nobody can know looking at the database or the program saying, hey, what's the password entered? No way, because it's all hashed. All right. The other form is encryption, but with encryption, you can also decrypt using a key. Okay, so basically that is what hashing, the difference between hashing and encryption is, right? So I'll just walk you through some of this. I'm connecting. There's a host user password. So what I'm doing here is instead of hash, I'm using a encryption decryption here. So I have, this is an encrypted value of the password. Crypt.decrypt will decode it, right? Decrypt is a decoding function. And I will not touch upon those topics here, just so that not to confuse. But crypt is another program that I had written to encrypt and decrypt. So there are encrypt function, decrypt function, hash function, etc., etc. But not to worry, just know that there is a function which decrypts the password. And then in this model.py is the one that interacts with MySQL. That is why it has a MySQL connector imported, right? And it has a cryptographic module also imported. So this connection is established, and there are a few methods. This is get row. Get row is saying, hey, select sal from user where username is equal to this. So this is what the login screen does, right? It has to go and query the table and say, hey, select me details from username, and it'll execute. So this is all syntactical. Okay, you don't have to worry much. See, one thing about this syntax, a lot of these open source technologies, you will find the syntax, everything on web, online, it's all out there. So you don't have to worry too much about the syntax. You will find that just about understanding what all libraries are there, what all functions are there, what all features are there, so that you can execute it. You don't have to buy hard anything. So this is the query. Cursor.execute is saying just execute, right? And cursor is again, I have a connection variable here, so I'm connecting to MySQL. Cursor is it's another handle from the connection, and I'm executing that handle here, executing the query, and I get the row, and I'm reading the row. So this is just getting the row for me. The next one is something called user exists. Now I'm asking this program, this function, hey, does the user exist or not? And then the same thing it does. It says model.getRow. It calls this function, and then it's saying if the row count is 1, cool, at least the row is existing. So it is taking the DB password, right? What is the DB password? So I entered Messi, right? And it told me, hey, welcome Messi, because it was able to identify Messi from the database. So here it's saying, hey, database password is equal to something. That something is coming from MySQL table. This is that something, right? For the Messi, this is the password. And that gets retrieved here. And then what this program is checking is whatever is fetched from the database, all the gibberish, and whatever I have entered on the screen, I'm hashing that. I'm hashing that password, generating a gibberish, hashed. It's not a gibberish actually, I'm just saying it for simplicity, but it's a hashed password. And I'm comparing the two hash password. And if it's perfectly matching, I'm saying returning 0. 0 means all is perfect, all is well. I'm returning 1 when the user is existing, but the password is invalid, right? User is that, but the password I have put valid. And I'm returning 2 when the user itself does not exist. All right. So that is what the model is doing here, and the user exists. So just remember, user exists is a function which says gets data from the database, validates the password, and returns. Get full name, well, as the name suggests, it's getting a full name. So full name is here. You can see highlighted full name, right? So full name is that. It just fetches the full name. That's it. There's not much into it. And then the last part is, may raise this marker. The last is add user. So where would add user be useful? Of course, for sign up. So I'm taking email ID, username, password, full name, everything. I'm applying again hashing algorithm on the password. That's all I have to do. After that, I'm inserting it. Query. This is standard SQL. Okay. Again, like I said, don't fret about the syntax and all. It's all you can find online. It's not you don't have to mug up syntax. So it's inserting into the table user with all the values, and then it's executing the query, and that's committing. That's it. So SQL commit. That's it. And then you have everything you need in the model.py. And that is the reason I have in the main, I have imported from model, I'm importing main function model, and from cryptographic, I'm importing the main function crypt, and I'm using those two. So what I showed you just a moment ago was this model program. All right. Just remember, this is the handle we are using for logging in. Okay. So I have taken the password, right? Now, let's say I save this. Okay. I save this, and now I will go to login. Let's see what happens. Sorry, it's no login and login. It's login, right? Let's say I say CR7, then I say CR7 rich. Nothing happens, right? So I have a record and nothing happens. That's because I removed the code, right? I've deleted. I'm not doing anything. It's just saying render template. It's not taking me to the profile page. Earlier, what was happening was taking to my profile page saying, hey, welcome Cristiano Ronaldo, but not now because I have removed the code. So let me add that code. But first I have to know whether this user ID and password is valid, right? So I will say, let's define some variable, this standard variable, can use anything. And then model is the program that I mentioned, which contains the database calls, and user exists. I'm going to type, but because I imported, I can see a drop down. I click on it, user exists, and I pass the two parameters, user and password. So you can break your programs functions to small pieces, right? Always. So you don't have to worry about writing in one big code everything. So it makes your life easy in troubleshooting. So user valid is a variable which contains three values, 0, 1, and 2, right? So I said 0 means all is well. 1 is invalid password. 2 is, well, the user does not exist. So I'm checking that if user. So one thing, so all these IDs, one good thing about all these IDs is the variables pop up even if they're part of it. And you all know that already, but I'm just mentioning it here. Okay, so I will just say return, and I want to redirect it to the. So this is, see, here's the thing. All right, I can directly render the page, which is the profile page, right? I can directly render the profile page, or I already have a profile function here, which renders the profile page. So let me just redirect to this particular function. So that makes my life easy, right? So whatever I do in that particular function, this function will not get impacted. I can change that function only. Here I'm just redirecting, and I'm saying main is the name of main.profile. So that's all what I'm going to do. And that's one more thing. So profile, I also need a username, right? Because like I said earlier, if it's Messi, it should say Lionel Messi, or the user name we have to pass, right? That's how it is able to render. And let's pass that username in this redirect, right? So main dot profile, and I will say user is equal to user. So this is what, that's it. All right. So that's all you have to do for if the user is perfect or the user is existing database. The next thing is if the user is not, let's say the password is invalid. Okay. In that case, I just user is invalid. Let's say it's invalid. So the third scenario is the user does not even exist, right? And this here I will say user is invalid because user does not exist here. Password is incorrect for user. Okay, so we just want to add that. So let me reiterate. It's a post function, and then I have a request.form, a password, user valid. I'm checking if user is existing. I'm passing it to the profile page. Here I'm saying password is incorrect, and last part is user is invalid when it isn't existing in the database, right? So that's all it is, and then I'm entering the login page. So if let's say the request is not post, some other request, it will continue to stay on the login page. However, the request is a post and user is valid, it will redirect to the profile page. Okay, let's run this. Let me restart. It's saying I've gone to the profile. Let me go to login. So I'll go to the initial login screen. Right. So I'll say Messi, and I will enter Messi. So let me put a valid password. Login. See, now it has, so earlier it was not going in, now it's going to the profile page, right? Because I am redirecting to the profile page if the user is valid. So one thing is I entered just Messi, but how does it know Lionel Messi? That's because it's fetching the full name. I actually have hard coded here, but in this case, let me remove it, right? So I just hard coded because to demonstrate, but we can actually enhance this prefix page. So we have to update. So let me not put that. Let me just go back, log out. Okay. And let me enter Messi again. And we'll see what happens. So let's say Messi, and I will say, yeah. So full name is not defined, right? There's no full name. That means the profile function is not complete. I need to get the full name. Then only I can display it, right? So let me do this. I will full name is equal to. So we saw, right? Was a function in model, extract full name, get full name, right? Okay, get full name, fine. Model dot get full name, it gives me this, and then what do I have to pass? I have to pass obviously the user, since that is a key. Okay, now I'm rendering the template profile.html. F name is equal to full name. I'm passing full name, but what is F name? Well, let's go to file.html. I will look at the, let me scroll once so that you can see F name somewhere here. Profile, yeah. So as you see, let me highlight it. F name. So it's saying welcome F name, right? And that is what full name is getting passed here. Okay. So now you wonder what all this open braces and all are. I'll come to that in a moment, right? So now I go to main. I have set the full name. Full name is equal to model get full name. I'm passing the parameter. Now let me restart the server. Or server gets auto restart every time I change the program. Okay. So here what I'm doing is I'm just putting some data with a valid password and saying welcome Lionel Messi. And just so that you don't think there is some kind of trick here, I'm gonna put Harry Kane, right? So password is incorrect for Kane now, right? 𝐀𝐻 is existing, but I put an invalid password for it. So saying welcome Harry Kane. Why? Because Harry Kane is there in the database. Harry Kane full name, right? As you see here, second row. So we have basically constructed from login to the profile page. Okay. Now let's quickly go to the sign up page, right? So what happens when I say new? It takes me to the sign up page, right? Now let me build. So this is where it comes. Right now nothing is happening, right? If I say register, let me fill something. Nothing is happening because I don't have any program here, right? I haven't put any code. Now what I have to do, I have to add a user. The moment there is a sign up request, right? I have to add a user. So that's what the new function will do. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is, yeah, we are checking if the, see, again, when you go to the sign up page, when you go from login screen to the sign up page, you are just showing an empty screen. But once you enter the details and submit, and then you click on register, it's a post HTTP method, right? Post. So you're submitting data to the backend server, right? So let's put it as post, right? So if so, what is that? Request dot method, the same code that we had earlier, right? So we're looking at the request variable, we're posting it, and now here's the thing: we have to get the details. So all the 4 details that we are going to fill. Because if right now if I say Andre is existing, Andre is not existing, so I'll say Andre. Okay, it's already there in the cache. So I'll say theory Andre, and nothing happened. Why? Because I haven't written full code. So here's the thing. I'll say now let me put that code. Request dot form, right? User password is equal to request dot form PSW. Sorry, password, and email is equal to request dot form email, and the last part is what? Full name. So this can be any name. Okay, it's the local variables, but one in the square bracket should be coming from HTML. Yeah. So that's what I did. Now what I'm going to do next is I have to insert this, right? So I'll say model dot add user. That was the function, right? So in that add user, we'll have to pass multiple variables. Let me use the arg star arg. Again, email. So what order I'm expecting? The model add user. Okay, email ID, user, password, and full name. All right. Email ID, user, password, and sorry, full name. So I'm passing the and let me get some. It returns some status, right? So anytime we add anything, we need to check for the status. Here there are 2 statuses. If the insert is successful, I'll get 0. If there is an error, I'll get 2. And if the user is already existing, then I'll get a return 1, right? So 0 means everything is cool, right? So let me just say status is equal to model the status, the SQL code basically. Yeah, that's the term. Let's call it SQL code then. It'll be better. Otherwise, it can mean something else, right? SQL code is equal to 0. So everything is perfect. Okay. When everything is perfect, now you'll think, what am I adding now? Flash. Okay. The Flash is another way, another library within Flask to show messages on the HTML. Okay. It's as simple as that. You just have Flash, you put some messages inside it, and you are good to go. And you can say use, yeah, sign up. You can just sign up, successful. Yeah, go back to login screen because we have to direct that. That is one thing. Then I have else if SQL code is equal to 1. When SQL code is equal to 1, and we are saying what is 1 means the user is existing. User is existing. Okay, and the only thing is we'll just say user is existing. Username, we have the username. Sorry, LF. And this is another good thing about all these IDs. It will tell you if there's an error right away. And then flash. If the user is not existing, yeah, some or insert failed. It could be anything. Server not available, right? Server issue. You can put something of that sort, and that's it. So now let me run this program. Sign up. Okay, refresh. So this time when I enter some, okay, so render a template sign up.html. There is some syntax error. Return render template sign up.html. right? So I have to add something here. What is it saying? So there is an issue. Just troubleshoot it quickly. Sign up successful. SQL code is model.add user. User is equal to user password. Sign up.html. Okay, and this is sign up.html. Okay, and let me just. It should not matter, but maybe it didn't get refreshed. Okay, so indentation problem. It's saying SQL code else elif SQL code, right? So let me see. Okay, sorry, I did some indentation problem. So that's something you have to be careful with Python, right? I just put some space additional by mistake and some through error. Okay, but again, that's fine. All those IDs will show all those errors. So that's really nice of it. So let me now try to register Thierry Henry, and let me put the password, right? So user is already existing. Why? Because I have already registered Thierry Henry in the past, right? Saying, so let me try. I'm just executing the query here in the database. So this is a MySQL workbench. So this is a good way to know what all values are existing. So Henry is already there. Okay. So we are short of players. Okay. Rooney is not there. Let me put Rooney. Rooney. Say okay. It's there. The cache. Wayne Rooney, and that's it. Password. Yeah. Sign up successful. Go back to this thing. Go back to logic sorry, and then Rooney, and that's it. So welcome Wayne Rooney. So basically, what we are seeing is most important login screen, and what it does. You saw it takes input and checks, validates, and returns message accordingly. Then you have the new, which is sign up. Just now we saw. So you saw this sign up successful message at the top, which gets flashed, and then the profile page where it says welcome. So these three we have seen. We haven't seen logout, but I think so. Here's the thing. Okay, I haven't introduced during while I was walking you through the code. I didn't introduce a session variable just so that I didn't want to make things complex. Session variable is where we have to hold some values of the user at the client side or maybe a server side, but usually there are multiple ways, but we store it at the client level, client side, session information. And then if you want to log out, we have to remove it from the session variable. So just let me not make it more complex because it's not entirely relevant to this part, but just know for that. And one last part that I want to show you is we are actually making this, there's an init program, right? This is an initialization program, which actually calls the main program. So I showed you main program, but init program is the driver. This is where the entry point is. So you'll see from Flask, same command, except that there's one app.secret key that you give when you start an application. So what happens is when you send session information to the client side, you need to encrypt it, encode it. So Flask takes care of that. That's why you give a secret key at the start. The session information is all encrypted. And then you are importing the main function that I showed you all along. Then you're registering the blueprint. Blueprint is, like I said, an app within main. That's it. So this is again a boilerplate code. You don't have to worry about the standard code. Here is where main is where I walked you through the various the maneuvering across the various screens. You can control through main.py. Okay, and just to reiterate quickly whatever we have done so far, or what are the important components of this login screen. Like I said, the init is initialization, where the control comes here, and this function create_app is executed when you start the server. And within that create, you are setting a secret key, you are importing the main, and you are registering the app called main. And once that happens, main starts executing, and main has different routes, different URLs, endpoints, which will serve the different actions on the UI side, right, the browser side. And there are a couple of other modules, model.py. It adds user, it gets full name, it checks users, all that stuff. And there is one cryptography module, which is this again added in just for encrypting, decrypting the password that is entered, right? So there are two passwords here, right? One is the database password, other is the password that I enter as a user. So as a user, I can enter any password, hence I'll hash it and store it in the database as a hashed value. The database password, only I know, obviously only I should know. And since I should not expose it, in the open in the public. So that's why I have the encrypted password, and then I'm decrypting it while I'm connecting. So, and for decrypting and encrypting, there is something called some keys. So I'm using specific keys. So which I mean, you can see a key and you can encrypt, doesn't matter, but I'm just saying in real-time application, you will have this kind of encryption and decryption, right? And then hashing. So these are the different modules. You don't have to worry too much about model and cryptography. This is where the heart of the program is, and this is what I would recommend, suggest to go back and have a look, because this is the main part of it. All right. So thank you very much. Have a good day ahead. Bye.